Thank you all for being here. I am Cody Bakker, our Ag Strategy Manager, and I am almost between you and lunch. We'll try to get through this and get some clickers in your hands to get through that survey and get you fed. So I'm gonna touch on a new strip trial option that we have for data collection that makes things simpler for growers to be able to accomplish a strip trial without extra coordination that we've had to go through in the past to be able to collect good data. And then I'm going to touch on our Climate Smart Lime program, kind of give you an update on where we're at with that and how that works. Don't worry, I'll get it. There we go. So in a given strip trial, if we want to look for something that might help our production out, we want to look for a product or a practice. Maybe that's an in-furrow product, foliar, maybe it's a planter add-on, something like that that we want to try to identify to test for. Then we want to see if there's a different set of variables or different treatments in those variables that we can tease out within a strip trial. If I'm going to pick a place in my field to perform this, I want to make sure that area is nice and uniform. I don't want to pick a spot that starts on a hill and ends in a drown-out spot or sits on a side hill through the whole width of the trial. So I'm going to make sure that I've got relatively an even playing field for each strip. And then I want to make sure that we're going to manage the variables throughout the season. You know, we want to have the variable of what we're looking for, but I don't want to have uneven wheel tracks in random areas of the trial, and I don't want to have, you know, the sprayer run out and we filled up and never made it back to that spot on the same day because we got rained out. We want to make sure that we don't have extra variables injected in that strip trial. Some of the history of the strip trials that we've done at Southern Min, it took a lot of coordination in the past, so we always had to have multiple people involved to make sure that we weren't losing any load data, any quality data. We had to have the grower and their harvester operator in really close proximity with the agriculturalist to make sure we're coordinating these things, make sure that the truck driver knew what he was supposed to do when he got to the scale house, and then make sure the scale attendant wouldn't get flustered with any new thing that showed up when they didn't have an idea that it was coming. Afterward, our research department or Jody would go through the data to get that back to shareholders to be able to come up with something usable. And that takes a lot of parties involved, and typically there can be some data lost in that transition. For the past 20 years, our agriculturalists have been doing variety strip trials. Every year, all 8 agriculturalists will go out to their district, work with a cooperator, and plant a variety trial like Dylan's here in this picture. There's been a few shareholder trials over the years that have yielded some pretty good data. However, it's not a lot, and it's never a simple process to try to perform. Maintaining that organization of all that data is really difficult to get it to the finish line and get some good results. So I developed something relatively simple. I just wanted to make a barcoded ticket that I could match up with a strip. The shareholder would go through a plan with their agriculturalist at the beginning of the season. Right now is that planting season. So I want to test something. I'm going to have a strip trial that's this many strips wide, testing these products. I'm going to need a few of these tickets to execute that trial. Then the grower would have to figure out if they want to take extra quality samples at harvest as well. So I want to make sure that you guys understand we have samples that come off the trucks at the piler, but we also with that have increased risk of losing those samples. Some other variable injected at the piler, I get a little chunk of mud breaking off, or somebody else's beet that was hung up making it in that sample. That's why we want to take extra samples from the field of those individual strips to make sure that we're collecting enough quality data to match up with that. And those are separate tear tickets that go in those tear bags, and this load ticket would go with the driver. They then take that ticket to the scale house, scan their field card like they normally would. The scale attendant knows that if they get this strip trial barcoded ticket with it, they just scan it right after their field ticket, and that load from that exact strip is automatically tagged with that load data. As soon as we get to the end of the season, then we're able to take that load data, whether that's the shareholder themselves, the agriculturalist can help them out. We can plug that data into a tool that we've developed to automatically calculate strip trial results. And that'll be available on our portal and exportable to Excel. Here's an example of what that looks like for where I'm going to enter that data. I've got a ticket number from that barcoded ticket matched up to that strip. I can plug in whatever treatment name or number I want to in there. Then I need my strip length and my strip width, 22 feet for a 12-row harvester, give or take whatever size harvester we're using. And then I've got additional lines to be able to enter my extra Tear Lab quality sample ticket numbers. So what that looks like is, here's an example of how the calculator works. I'm able to get results down here and show me how those strips performed next to each other. And I left some quality Tear Lab samples out of the third line there, just to show you that if I'm only relying on the piler and I don't take any extra samples out in the field, this is what can happen if that truck doesn't get sampled at the piler, sample gets lost, or some error happens where we're not able to collect that quality data. So if we want that, we need to take those extra samples in the field. I wanted to try a few things. Most of you know probably that I'm a little bit of a planter nerd, and I wanted to see if we could test a few of these things in a big strip trial. So I set this up, and small farms were gracious enough to accept my demands, and we made a very big strip trial. We tested downforce. You can see on their setup here, they've got Delta Force cylinders on this planter. We tested the speed because it's a high-speed planter. It's got the speed tubes inside. You can't see them under the V-sets there, but then we tested population as well. So we've got the 9 different strips in there, 9 different planter passes with those treatments. I came up with a goofy way, maybe, but a new way of evaluating spacing because we don't really have a lot of history of actually going out and measuring spacing post-plant or post-emergence. So I made use of some cheap yardsticks I got from Big Iron a couple years ago, cut them up and made a little hockey stick to go along and measure some spacings. What do we do with that data? You know, this is the first attempt at this. We had to start somewhere, so I wanted to just take a look. I had Tucker, our intern, with me out in this strip trial one day when the wind was blowing about 25 miles an hour, chasing our field data sheets across the field. And we collected a lot because I didn't know how many we needed, so I decided 300 was the number. And then we did that on each of the 9 reps to get 2,700 data points. It was a long day for Tucker. So I'm not going to go through all 3 of those trials just to save time, but that high-speed trial spacing, this is what the distribution looked like at 6 miles an hour, 8 miles an hour, and then at 7 miles an hour, we were able to get a little bit tighter group. I wanted to create sort of a histogram like this so I could kind of compare it to what I see on a 2020 monitor and maybe in one of your guys' planter tractors. This may be not highly significant, but if I'm able to get a little tighter tolerance, a little more consistency at 5 inches, maybe 7 miles an hour is the right speed to dial in that planter at. And the results somewhat reflect that as well here, where 7 miles per hour was our most effective treatment in this trial. I also put in the data into that calculator tool on the portal and came up with similar results. I don't have the exact same data in here yet. I'm still working on a few tweaks on that calculator tool. So doing it this way, sending those trucks in with those tickets, it's a lot less coordination. We still want to take those extra samples so we get good data. And if you guys want to plan on doing some trials like this, it's really easy. Just tell your agriculturalist, hey, I want a few tickets to try this. I've got 1 or 2 variables I want to test. It's really simple to go ahead with. Now we'll switch to lime. If you haven't gotten sick of my scoop videos yet, you may have seen this one where I went through and during harvest I went back to the lime pile and did a little in-depth explanation of why we use lime and how we get it and whatnot. About a year ago we got into this Climate Smart program, and this was a USDA grant. We were able to tie a nutrient management program into this grant. So our lime has the analysis that you see down on the bottom right there. We've got 6 pounds of nitrogen, and that's where that ties into this program. If I'm able to claim that I have 6 pounds of nitrogen in my lime, then I can replace 6 pounds per acre of any synthetic fertilizer that I'm using, such as urea. So for every ton that we get out the door that our growers are able to make use of for this program, they can get a $5 incentive per ton to put this on their fields. And it's not designed to cover your cost of application and hauling, but it chips away at the total. This year we had over 100,000 tons of eligible lime that could go toward this program of the growers that signed up. It's a nice start, and it's nice to see an uptick in that, and that can equate out to a lot of potential nitrogen fertilizer replacement. In 2016, Dr. Chanda and Jason Brandner went through this study, and this was following up a long-term lime study where they applied all the way up to 20 tons per acre. And just a couple things that I want to point out about this is that it's a very, very good linear response to seeing even what we get out of that first 5-ton treatment bump, and although going all the way up to 20 ton, you get a lot of fertility out of that as well from our lime. But you see that nice linear response where we're really bumping up our sugar per acre as we're going up in our lime rates. And this held true even 10, 12 years after those initial applications. We were still seeing good response from that yield, as well as seeing our incidence of Aphanomyces root rot reduced. So that's the key that we've been preaching for years, and why our shareholders are still continuing to come get this product even before an incentive program came about. If we're able to reduce our Aphanomyces, our yield is gonna show that response. So if we want to haul some out, our shareholders have access to our east scale, which is what you see here if I'm pushing the right button. We have RFID set up out there. That's a separate RFID tag than your beet tags. So if you want to get set up with that, that's what you need to know. You'll have to work with me and our shipping department to get that set up. I want to go through a quick example of just a kind of an average, maybe a random hauling scenario, just so you have an idea on cost. If I'm custom hauling some lime, I'm going to be somewhere in that 650 a loaded mile range. And if I'm, say, hauling that lime 20 miles, 22-ton load, it's going to be about $5.90 a ton to get it in my field. Then if I'm having it custom spread, I'm going to be about $8 an acre. And if I get 4 ton to the acre out in my field, I'm at $32, and for a total of about $55 an acre. It's not a small investment, and that really says something that if our growers are willing to make that investment, it's truly still paying off. Lindsay will go through some numbers this afternoon that are going to make that pretty convincing. I got a few calls this fall, and we've gotten these calls throughout the past of growers getting some lime that looked a little questionable. And believe me, there's been some that looks a lot more questionable than this. However, that darker stuff on the right side, most of the time how that happens is we'll have a spot in the lime pit where maybe we got a little bit of excess rain where we couldn't get that lime pushed up and blended in time before the rain came. And it just sat there, got a little stagnant, got a little stinky, sticky. The other thing that can happen too is if the factory happens to have a bad day with their lime presses, sometimes we might get it coming out just with a little excess moisture in it that way too. If that happens during campaigns, say mid-January when it's 0 degrees outside, the factory guys have to haul that out there and dump it out, and it freezes up right away. We're not able to blend it in real well, and then it just gets buried, so we're going to eventually run into a few pockets like that. But overall, this season, especially with an open winter, it looks really good out there. We've been able to keep our contractor going out there. You can see his dozer in the top of that middle picture. They're able to get out there and blend it in when it warms up in between these cold snaps and blend it in really nice, so we're going to have a really decent product going forward. I wanted to answer some shareholder questions that I got because that lime is really difficult to deal with. It sticks in your trailer, you got to shovel it out, try to scoop it into the spreader, and then scrape the spreader out. We just wanted to make sure that that lime was being consistent from a fertility value standpoint. And I took multiple samples from both the clean looking lime and some of that dirty looking lime. And overall, it came back really pretty consistent. We're not sacrificing the fertility value just because that lime is a little tougher to deal with. This is what the lime pile looked like yesterday. The factory's been having a phenomenal campaign and a phenomenal run with the lime presses, so it's looking really good out there. I think that our lime this coming season is going to be excellent to deal with, so I'm not concerned about anything at this point. The shareholder adoption of this Climate Smart program has been a really good uptake, just considering we rolled it out right before harvest. We got over 21,000 acres enrolled. I think we had about a 25,000 ton increase from the lime that got hauled out just by the shareholders, not including the non-shareholders. There's a lot of data collection involved with this program. We need to get a contract signed by you guys. We need to get some FSA data from our shareholders in the FSA office. Then we got to coordinate that between myself and the ag department and then with the accounting department as well. For this first year program, our first initial payments are going to be rolling out here sometime in February. Traditionally, our shareholders have received about 50% of our lime. We're starting to see a shift a little bit, whether it's because of this program or not. I think the value is there for shareholders to use this regardless of a $5 incentive. This next coming year, I expect to bump that number up quite a bit. So if you want to enroll in 2025, shareholders can haul lime anytime. They just got to give me a call or give the shipping department a call to make sure that you're set up in our shipping system as a customer. And then all of our information for that is posted on our website, on our public website that you can see in our co-products section. Again, set up that customer account, make sure that we're able to track your loads. And all of our shareholders will have access to the e-scale so they can cruise in and out of the lime pit. Sign that agreement, and there's more information in that Climate Smart section of the portal if you have any further questions. And you can contact me to get started. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
On the two graphs that you showed with the benefits of the lime, is there any, did they see any interaction with soil type or pH in that with the response?
Yes. So you're going to increase your pH. Our PCC product is about a 1040 to 1100 pound product from an ENP standpoint. It's not, it's not pure calcium carbonate, so it's not going to go crazy with the pH. But I believe, Ashok, I think you guys did see a slight response, as well as the calcium contents were obviously elevated too.
Yeah, the original pH was, I think, 6.2.
Yep.
Even with 15 and 20 tons, we were only at 8.1. It didn't go up beyond that.
I know, but initially, did the initial soil pH or soil type influence the response to the lime?
Did everyone hear the question?
So
the initial...
is there an effect of soil type on the benefit of lime, you know.
yes.
But I think this was only done, that's, data is only from Breckenridge, that's one soil type, so it's not,
16 P- okay.
yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
The initial question was, are we seeing a big bump in the pH or, you know, depending on the initial soil pH that we're dealing with. Up in Breckenridge, you were on a 6.2 there for those tests initially. You know, we have 6.2s down here as well, but we also have a range as well.
Yeah.
But we're not using a pure calcium carbonate, and we're not going to see huge bumps. Like Ashok was saying, even though they applied those really high rates, they were only potentially raising up to 8.1 was at the highest that you recall.
Yes.
So it's not going to go through the roof.
But I just want to add, I think the calcium, I think it's contributing to, you know, how it's managing Aphanomyces. But I think if you go to Sweden and some of the European countries, what they're saying is if you have less than 3,000 parts per million, you're pretty much, you know, you'll see bad Aphanomyces in the field. But in these trials, I think we didn't see any effect until, you know, our soils are already rich in calcium. But I think once we reach that 5,000 parts per million, you know, that's when it's kind of plateau. You know, we didn't see any increase in calcium response. So